Hi there, Lindsay here, the Frugal Crafter. Today we're going to paint these macaroons and a glass of milk using gouache. And the real-time version of this tutorial is up right now in Critique Club. I'll have more information about Critique Club in the video description if you want to check it out to see if it's for you. It's a monthly group where you can share your artwork for a critique from me, and you get lots of tutorials. There's about 36 or more up right now, and there's 2 new ones posted every month, and it's $5 a month in case you're curious and you'd like to join. Anyway, information of that is in the video description. And I'm starting off by just sketching with a mix of burnt sienna and ultramarine blue in a toned tan watercolor book. You could definitely use the toned tan mixed media paper by Strathmore if you want. This is the toned tan watercolor paper by Hahnemeulhe, and I'm really enjoying this. Actually, it's toned beige, so if you're looking for it, look for toned beige because that's what it's called. It's a nice paper. You know, I find that I like it better with colored pencil or with gouache or with watercolor mixed with those medias, just because you've got that tone of the paper and it's hard for your colors to kind of glow like you would have with a white paper. But if you keep that in mind and you intend to use an opaque medium or some opaque mediums for like your brighter highlights, I think you'll really enjoy it because it's like you're starting off with that mid-ground, and it gives your work kind of like can give your work a finished appearance with less work. So something to consider if you're looking for something different. I'm sketching the macarons on with just white gouache, because I know that I'll want those colors to be very pastel. And for the background, I'm just putting in some, basically some, you know, neutralized tan color. Now I could have just used the color from the paper, but I taped down my edges so I'd have a nice border, so I really wanted to take advantage of that. And plus, I wanted a little texture in the background. I didn't want it to be just, you know, flat, you know, blur. And if you're going to do this so you can have a nice border, make sure you do paint all the way to the edge of the tape. I didn't on the bottom, and I didn't realize it until I was all done and I took the tape off. So just kind of keep that in mind if you want to have that nice white border. Doesn't really matter, it's just aesthetics, but in a sketchbook I think it's kind of nice because you're typically not framing these, you're just leaving them in there, and if you flip through and you have a nice frame, I don't know, I think it just makes the work look a little more finished. I'm blocking in the milk with some white gouache here, just you know, pretty basic. I really like that you can kind of draw and redraw and smush out and go over and keep reworking with gouache. You don't quite have that much flexibility with watercolor or many other mediums. I mean, like colored pencil, once you kind of fill that tooth, you're kind of out of luck unless you want to get some fixative. I just think gouache is just so forgiving for that. And I love the fact that you can go back in and rework an area if you want to blend it, or if something, you know, just isn't quite right, you've got that flexibility as well. And I also love the sketchy aspect of using gouache. I feel like I can draw and paint at the same time with it. Whereas if I was doing a watercolor, I'd want to have a little more of a precise drawing underneath to make sure that, you know, I've got that blocked in and I don't have to think about it, and you know, while I'm painting. But with gouache I can kind of just jump in and have fun with it and not worry about it. Now you can do this with acrylics or oils if you prefer. You don't have to have gouache. In fact, I think this would work really well with acrylics because you can just let something dry and go on top if you want to, if your color's not just right, or you could, you know, glaze on highlights or shadows if you need to deepen or lighten something. So use what you have. I prefer gouache myself over acrylics. I love oils, but just the dry time is puts me off a bit on using oils too frequently, because then you've got to have places to dry your paints, and that's not always available. You know, I've been rearranging and reorganizing and doing all sorts of you know, stuff like that around the house, so I don't want a bunch of oil paints I have to, you know, juggle around and deal with. Make sure when you're doing your macarons or macarons, you keep the colors pastel. I don't know why I can never remember that these are macarons and not macaroons. I always say it wrong. And then I'll probably get confused, and then I'll say it right and think I'm saying it wrong. I don't know. But macarons. But you want to make sure they're nice and pastel. Otherwise, they're going to look a little garish because they are kind of bright. And just, you know, just mix. The colors that I'm using are from the 24 set of Hahnemeulhe gouache that I reviewed a couple weeks ago on my channel, or a week and a half ago. on my channel, I think. I can't remember. I film things in batches sometimes, so it's hard to remember when exactly everything airs. And putting a little shadow underneath. So on the tabletop there, you've got some shadow and some reflection, so that's why you're seeing the reflection of that yellow macaron in the milk, but you're also seeing some shadow there where the light's being cut off, so just kind of keep that in mind. I decided to put some chocolatey filling inside most of these macarons, except for the, well, I did put it into the green one, but I think I'll probably end up making that more of a pistachio color. But it gives me a nice contrast, because that's the one trouble I've had with painting macarons, because I love that subject. I think they're so pretty, is that there's not very much contrast, so it can get really muddy and boring and mushy, and then you don't see the details. So that's why I put the chocolate in there instead of like a white filling or a filling the same color as the macarons, because I thought it would just look a little bit better. And you can see quite a bit of shadow in between the halves of the macarons in the photo, and I thought that would be a nice way to go. I'm also increasing some of the shadows just for a little bit more impact, especially on the glass bottle, because it just kind of bleeds into the background. And now I'm going in with shadows on the macarons and some highlights too. So I like to skip around a little bit. There's a little bit of a texture around the bottom of each half. I think it's called the foot of the macaron. It's got this like kind of cakey, ruffly texture there. It's kind of like I don't know, it's got kind of like I guess cakey would be the right description. It's rough and kind of pocked, and so I'm trying to get that in there. They look like little talking hamburgers, I think. As I was painting this, I'm like, oh, they look like little hamburgers that are going to talk to me, little colorful hamburgers. Oh, it's funny what you think of when you're painting, I think, anyway. So the real-time version of this tutorial in Critique Club is narrated live. It's about an hour long, so it's not a super duper long one. Definitely something I think anyone could jump in and try with gouache or acrylics. Oils if you want to. I do find that with oils, I think you might struggle with the white, because white tends to overpower a lot of colors, especially in oil paints, because they stay wet for so long. So that would be my only word of caution if you're going to do this in oil paints, is just maybe hold back on the white a little bit, because until the end, because it will overtake your colors. And then it might be really difficult to get the contrast you need, because the paint stays wet for so long. It's not like you can just let it dry and then go in, unless you want to wait like a few days to let it dry so you can go in with a darker color. So that would just be my one word of caution if you're going to do that with oil paints. And if you've been curious about gouache, the set I'm using is not very expensive. It's like 24 big pots of color and 3 brushes with a palette and everything. I think it's like $30 or less. So not expensive. There's smaller size sets, and honestly, those smaller size sets are just as good and will definitely get the job done. They mix really well, and it's not like you need to have 24 colors. Getting the 18 color set would suffice. Lots of affordable options out there nowadays. The Arteza gouache, the set of 24, that's a great set to have too. Not very expensive. So, you can look around and see where the best price is. And I think if you get the Hahnemeulhe, the Arctics, the Arteza, I'm trying to think if there's any other gouaches I've used recently that I've liked a lot that were inexpensive. Lucas Studio gouache is pretty good. And those are all, budget brand gouaches. And there isn't as much of a difference between student grade and artist grade gouache as there are in like other media, such as like watercolor. There's a huge difference. There's not so much with gouache. So I would definitely say try it with a cheaper version first. If you love it, as you use up your colors, then buy like an M. Graham or a Schmincke or a let's see, those are the two that or Holbein. Those, one of those brands. They have all tried and true gouaches, and then you can do it tube by tube as you know what you're going to use, and then you won't waste a bunch of money or a bunch of supplies. Now I'm putting the final highlights on the jar there. I love doing those last highlights, and I'm just using my hairdryer basically because I want to dry everything up before I remove my tape, and I also recommend that that you heat up the tape too. I'm having some very unreliable results with tape on watercolor paper lately, especially washi tape. So I'm trying to use it up, and I do notice it tends to rip sometimes, but heating it up with a hairdryer will definitely help. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. I'll have a link to the full-time version of this in Critique Club down in the video description, as well as the supplies that I used. Thanks so much for watching. Until next time, happy crafting.